50 Shades of Grey versus 50 Shades of Rosie. Haha! Okay, so I've been meaning to do this one for a while. 50 Shades of Grey. You know what? I confess, I loved the books. And I loved the movie. Many of you who know me will be very challenged by that. Why did I even start reading them? Well, I started reading the first one because it was given to me at a women's gathering. So the woman who gave it to me is a friend of mine. She said, I'm just about to put this on the fire. It's a load of nonsense. Are you interested in it? And I was like, I don't read novels. You know, I read books about my work. I don't read novels, but fine, whatever. Yeah, sounds interesting. Everyone's into it at the moment. Didn't pick it up for ages. And I do a yearly cleanse. Basically, this yearly cleanse involves 2 enemas a day. So you're basically sticking your tube up your bum morning and night and lying down on your bathroom floor for 20 minutes or so, waiting for the coffee or the chamomile tea to sort of do its work, and then you sit on the loo. I didn't have anything else to read that was exciting. All my workbooks seemed a little dull in this process, so I picked up 50 Shades of Grey, started reading it. Was just like so disappointed with it as I was starting. It was just, I just couldn't get over the way it was written. I thought it was badly written, and sorry, because to the author, I just didn't really like the way it was written. But by halfway through, and why did I keep reading it? Because I was just there and I had nothing else to do. I got hooked. And then I ended up reading the second and the third book while I was on holiday sailing on my dad's boat, and my friend, a colleague who will remain nameless, was also there with her son, and I got her into 50 Shades as well. So she was reading book 1 or book 2 and I was reading book 3, and literally in 2 weeks the 2 and 3 got read, and it was all this sort of, oh my goodness, I can't believe it, and then okay, so what was it about? Was it about the sex? No, it was not about the sex. I mean, yeah, okay. I was reading Jackie Collins when I was 14. Not saying that's a good thing. Maybe it scarred me for life, but it wasn't really so much about that. It certainly got dull. But what I really felt fascinated about was this idea of him being really deviant. You know, Christian's really, really fucked up. He is messed up to the T, and no surprise if his mother was a crack-headed whore who, no doubt when she was pregnant with him, was having sex and smoking crack and God knows what else she was doing. I mean, that kind of influence, never mind his early years where he was neglected and had cigarettes stubbed out on him and was beaten and left with no food and watched his mother having sex. I mean, all of that is going to mess you up, and so is your experience in the womb. And that's what really worries me when I hear of, I've not actually ever seen any, but when you hear of porn magazines and videos with pregnant women, I just think, my God, those poor children. So back to the story. You know, here you are, you have this innocent woman, she's a virgin, okay? I haven't read any Mills and Boon, by the way, so I'm not influenced by that. But she's a virgin, he's a complete deviant, control freak apparently. Yeah, he's got a helicopter and an amazing apartment, but she's like really strong-willed. She doesn't give a shit about that. That's all nice, but she's not really vibed about that. She's into him, like strong chemistry. And I do disagree with the critics about the movie. I thought the chemistry between the two was brilliant, and I thought Dakota was gorgeous. I can't remember the guy's name, but he wasn't quite my Christian, but she was definitely my my Anastasia, and yeah, it was a really good 2 hours. That's what I was saying. So anyway, back to the story. She is in control. She's the sub, but she's in control. He wants her to concede to all this stuff, and she's going, I can't, I'm sorry. I can go this far, but that's too far. This is where I stand. And he isn't romantic. He's not into vanilla. He's not into dates and nurturing and sleeping together, like cuddling up, and suddenly he's doing all of these things. So somehow what we're really dealing with here is this idea that you can never change another person. You can't. But through your very being, they can be changed by you. They can make choices that they haven't made before for themselves. So we can only change ourselves. We can't change other people. And sometimes people come into our lives that test us to our very core. They actually bring up our damage, which is what she did for him. All the other subs Basically, they were just playing out the role, and they could do it so long and then they'd go and he would just let them go. He was never really having to face himself. He was in control of his business. He had his playroom, and he'd just be looking for the next sub to play out the same drama. You know where I'm going, different relationships that we have, different people, we attract them, and we just keep having the same drama, and it gets to a certain point and you're not willing to look at your stuff deeper than that. And therefore what happens is you break the relationship up, or it's not serving you anymore. Maybe the lessons have been learnt and you move on. In this instance, he wasn't learning any lessons. He was just treading water, and when it got too much for the woman, she was gone, another woman comes in. Until Anastasia comes in, never met anyone like her. She's pushing all of his buttons. He's pushing all of her buttons. I mean, suddenly she's not a virgin anymore, and she's deeply into a scene that is something most of us don't experience in our lives. And he changes because he loves her, and she, in her purity, somehow changes him through her being her truth. Like, she doesn't change him, he changes himself through her really being in her truth and being really strong, really centered and really grounded in that. And that's why I love that story. That's why I read all 3 books. I mean, I thought it was very gripping. I really did. And, you know, there she is. You know, the family's getting suspicious of her. Suddenly they're getting married. Suddenly she's pregnant. Is she just in it for the money? And then there's all this stuff that happens that proves that she's not in it for the money. My only real reservation was around her baby's birth. And also the controlling around birth control and the doctor, and, you know, having the pill or having the injection or whatever. And, you know, I'm not into that kind of birth control. I think it makes us infertile. I should say it can cause problems with fertility if we're on it a long time. That's my opinion. I'm not saying anything that hopefully will get me into any trouble. At the same time, I recognise we don't want unwanted pregnancies and we need to be careful, but we also need to be careful about sexually transmitted diseases. So the real issue I had was about, you know, it's very much this American model of we're going to try for a natural birth, but you're trying for a natural birth in a very medical setup where, you know, you're being induced or you're being managed. If this doesn't happen quickly enough, then it needs to be this. And I just wish in that book, and maybe I will write an alternative birth story at some point, I wish that she'd sort of gone with Christian to rebirthing sessions, and they'd kind of gone and cleared his damage from the womb, and maybe they'd gone to some womb surround workshops and actually repatterned both of their births so that when it came to her giving birth, he was really there and supporting her and getting over his control issues and actually giving her his strength and empowering her rather than taking her power away. Because in the end, you know, what this was about was, I want to do it myself, I want to do it myself, but she's not progressing and she's being wheeled off for an emergency cesarean, and, you know, he's really worried about her and then the baby, and then, you know, when you get to the next book, she's pregnant again and he's just insisting that she has a planned cesarean. Now, I know the impact of these things on the babies and the breastfeeding, and then they're also going to the playroom when she's pregnant, and I'm thinking, I'm not so sure about that and how good that is, but then we don't want shame. So, you know, actually, if they're getting pleasure and they're releasing oxytocin, who's to judge that? I've definitely changed my opinion on that, actually, having just done my shame vlog, very long shame vlog. So what I would say is, yeah, in my ideal around the birth, they would have basically dealt with their birth damage. They would have hired themselves a doula. They would have opted for a home birth ideally, or if not, a birth centre with a birthing pool. They had an amazing independent midwife, and God knows they could afford it, so they could have had a shaman in, they could have done whatever they liked, but she would have done loads of work to process her emotions around giving birth, and maybe he would have realised he's better off not in the room. Actually, that might have been a possibility, because all of his stuff would have been projected on her when she was giving birth. And we know he's a control freak and has a lot of stuff going on. So I would have liked to have seen a really empowered birth where she showed him even more of her strength, and he was just in awe of her. Like, just, wow, look at this woman. She's giving birth to my baby. I'm not doing the hard graft here. She's turning this concept of pain around and she's releasing the endorphins. Man, she should have had an orgasmic birth. that should have been written in. I reckon that's the alternate. So I'm giving an alternate birth view here. And how much damage on a cellular level would have been cleared for that baby. And then they would have had their baby moon for a whole month, and they would have just stayed in bed, and their family and friends would have come along and wouldn't have pumped loads of nasty things into the kids, and they would have just nurtured and supported them as a unit so that they could bond with their baby, and she would be breastfeeding and loads of skin to skin, and they'd be sleeping with their baby, and he would have really softened up through seeing her in her power, and I reckon it would have peeled more layers away from him and actually taught him much more about the mystery of life, and just to dive in and to find a different way of being in the world where he was actually less outwardly controlling and able just to revere this amazing goddess woman in his life. So that's my alternate. I don't think this is about condoning domestic violence. I'm sorry, I don't think it's about that. I also don't think it's about the stereotype of, you know, all women want some super rich, power hungry masochist for a husband or a boyfriend. Whatever. This is like entry level perception. Sorry, but there's so many layers to this story, and I could lunch out on it and talk about it for hours and hours and hours. But I don't think it's anti-feminist. I don't think it's anti-women. I think in the end, she was the strength and the driving force that helped him to heal and to access his pain. And that's what we need to do. We need to access our pain. So that's my take on 50 Shades of Grey. It has inspired me to create 50 Shades of Rosy, where looking through different emotions. We'll see if we get to 50. We've done 3 so far. But each time I do a video, more come up. So far I've done guilt, blame and shame. I'm not sure if blame will come out. I might have to redo it because it involves sensitive information. But we're going to go into responsibility. We're going to go into, what's the other one that I was thinking? Rejection, that's a big one. And everything else that comes up. So if you've got ideas and you want to take on certain emotion, then let me know. Okay, thank you.